This is what we made in Windows Forms and what we need to recreate in WPF, but we won't try to replicate this because it's not ideal. Let me start by making a little note. You must have noticed this line. It says that properties having this D prefix have effect only in the design time in Visual Studio. IDEST users will not see anything marked with the D prefix. As you see here, only we, as developers, can see the effect of these properties in the designer window. The purpose of ignorable is to help the designer of the program. That's it. I prefer to check design changes by running the project. Now let's begin designing the game user control. As always, add the background color and add a loaded event, which we will code later. Let's add resources in advance. We'll make here simple radio buttons. Images in this user control will not stretch. Also, let's make text blocks more readable. Finally, let's recreate stack panel style from user control select pad. Now we are done with user control resources. We will have tools at the top and game at the rest of the space. For tools, we will use a control called toolbar tray. To remove dots on the left, set the isLocked property to true. One of the tools will be the restart button, which will have both an image and text. We will set resources for this toolbar tray to set the stretch property of images to fill. Inside a toolbar tray, you should place a control called Toolbar. And here we can finally place our tools as usual controls. The first one will be the Restart button, with both an image and text. Inside this button we need a grid with two columns, one for the image and one for the text. Don't forget to set the max height property for the image. The next button will be Main Menu. I don't have an image for it, but let's allow this button to have it in theory. And finally the Exit button. Let's copy the previous button. We don't want to prompt users to leave the game, so let's hide it in a small down arrow button using the toolbar overflow mode. By default, all tools have it set to as needed. If the toolbar cannot fit all of them, the last ones will be hidden to the down arrow button. But this very specific button will be always hidden. Those were our tools. Now let's create a grid with two rows for the game UI. The first row will be a group box for playing, while the second row will contain an image of the kitty shown when the game is won. We will make a structure for controls from down to bottom. So let's use a stack panel. At the top, users will see the name of their pet. We will put it inside a fancy border. Make sure this border has at least some minimum width in case it ever appears too small. The corner radius of the inner border should be equal to that of the outer border. And here we at last put a text block to show the pet's name. Below will be a border containing stats, the image of our pet, and its description passed from user control select pet. We will put all stats inside a stack panel. Every text block will need a name, because we will change it every day from code. Let's increase the margin at the bottom, added the last number, to separate good stats from hunger, which will be below. The image will be in grid column 1. Make sure to give it a name. For now, I will put the puppy image as a placeholder. Let's put a text block for daily messages right below this border. Just like in Windows Forms, we will put 3 radio buttons for making a choice below. The third radio button will be hidden by default. Now let's recreate the grid for items. We will have 4 items, so we need 2 columns and 2 rows. For each item, we will use a stack panel. Each stack panel will contain a text block and a button. We will use line breaks to make multi-line description. Let's copy the first stack panel. Don't forget to change the click event. Make sure all names are changed. Of course, they must be different. And we have only one stack panel left to do. The last stack panel will be for buying fruits. Just like before, change the column and the row, change the name and the click event. Below the grid, we will place a text block warning about the last day. We also need a colorful button for moving to the next day. We will set its width to make it smaller. Let's add khaki color. We will place two text blocks below showing final happiness and game result. That's it for the stack panel and group box. Let's put an image below our group box. Well, that's it for the design part. Let's see how it looks in the game. That's fine. Let's start coding. Let's create a region for our variables. We will copy variables from Windows Forms. This time we keep most of the variables. Let's create a boolean stating whether the game shows daily comments. We are done with the variables region. Let's create a region for the constructor and loaded event. In the constructor, we need to assign these user controls variables to the parameters passed from user control select pet. We also need to get the right image. For this purpose, we need an image source converter. Now let's set the pet images source property value. This is where we need image source converter. Here we set the path to the image. That's why we passed the string variable pet based on the pet choice to this user control. Let's also set the appropriate description. Let's copy the load event from Windows Forms. Let's separate daily comments from other code inside the loaded event. Before mixing the comments, we need to check whether the game actually shows them. Let's create a setting of type bool for this. And here we check whether daily comments equals true. If it does, we do what we did in Windows Forms. We don't need any win stuff here because that's for pet selection. Instead, we need to set the game stats. Finally, we need to set the content for our radio buttons. That's it for loading. Let's create a region for upper buttons in the toolbar. Again, make a subregion for restart. This should be identical to what we made in user control select pad. And like in user control select pad, the same main menu and exit buttons. Upper buttons are finished. Now let's copy button next. Bigger than 0 is equivalent to bigger or equal to 1. Instead of making one if inside another, we can combine them using two ampersand characters. Let's make our game a bit more difficult and add a 50% chance of decreasing happiness by 1 separately from hunger every day. There is an equal chance to decrease the happiness by either 0 or 1. Don't forget that plus plus is the same as typing plus equals 1. Now that we are done with the click event, let's copy the play method it references. Don't forget, in WPF there is no visible property. In Windows Forms, visible is a boolean, while in WPF, visibility is an enumerator. We will remake our code to make it more logical. Okay, we have removed redundant code, and the play method should be fine now. Let's copy the final method from Windows Forms. After every win, the game should immediately save the results. That's all we do in the final method. Let's check whether the game is already playable. Good. The only thing that is left is to code items buttons. Let's copy the code from BuyBone from Windows Forms. Let's do the same for BuyToy. The same for BuyForage. And finally copy the code for BuyFruit from Windows Forms. I think we have done everything. Let's run the game. We have completed the migration of our game from Windows Forms to WPF. As you see, you can only recreate the user interface. As for the C# code, you have to greatly modify it because of the differences in assemblies used by Windows Forms and WPF. A good advice for you, always start your projects already in WPF, because often you waste more time changing your code and replicating the UI than you would by simply starting from scratch in WPF. By now you already have two working projects. We will not develop the Windows Forms project anymore. Instead, we will fully concentrate on WPF. And in the next part, we will create options window, where players can decide whether they want to see daily comments and set the default pet name. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to see more tutorials.